Hello, dear friends. Welcome to our webinar, Mars Retrograde 2022, and how to go with the flow. In this webinar, you will learn all of the important information and details about this period, which begins on the 30th of October, 2022, and will continue until the 12th of January, 2023. So, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I will try to answer as many as possible, even if it's after the webinar, if you're watching the recording. So, what are we going to talk about? First, I will explain briefly what is a retrograde cycle and why is this important, how to interpret that. We will talk about Mars and what it means specifically for Mars to be retrograde, which are the main life areas that will be triggered. Also, I really want to focus on some constructive and positive strategies, because I think sometimes people over-focus on the possible challenges, but they actually miss the fact that actually there could be some really positive changes when we have those cycles. So we will talk about those possible beneficial activities and strategies. Also, I will give you the most important dates, which are indicated by the aspects that Mars retrograde will have with the other planets. So we will also get a better idea of what we can expect. And also, I will mention a brief general prediction for each sign. So make sure to listen to your sun and rising sign in order to understand in which life areas you are most likely to face with those experiences, events, or transformations. And if you, let me see if I can do something here while we are live. I think I should be able. If you would like to get your personal Mars retrograde report, one moment, please. You should be able to see in the description below. Yes, there is a 20% discount for a personalized Mars retrograde report, and also a special option for 2023, also personal prediction. So you can check the information in the description below. So hello to everybody. I'm very happy to see you. And let's get started. Very briefly, what is a retrograde cycle? What does the retrogradness mean? Retrograde planet means a planet which seems to be moving backwards. So we have like a regular natural direction, which all of the planets are following in their regular motion. This is also indicated by the direction of the sun. So, except for having this regular direction of the motion, every now and then, each of the planets, except for the sun and the moon, start to move in the opposite direction, which from our perspective from the Earth seems like they're going backwards. And this is what we are calling retrogradness. Of course, the most popular is Mercury retrograde, because we have those cycles 3 to 4 times each year. Venus is retrograde once in 18 months. Social and outer planets are retrograde for a few months each year. The outer planets are actually retrograde almost half of the time. But Mars is retrograde only once in 2 years. So this is the rarest event that we can observe. And only 5% of people have Mars retrograde. So only 5% of the time Mars is retrograde. So from that point of view, this makes the Mars retrograde cycle the most important one, because the more rare something is as an event, the more specific it is, the more changes it can bring. And also, I would say, the least adapted we are to those shifts. So again, Mercury is retrograde 3-4 times each year. We are kind of used to this. It's happening basically every 3 to 4 months, Mercury goes retrograde. With Mars, this happens only once in 2 years. So we are not that prepared and we are not that used to this retrograde cycle. So that's the main reason why it is so important. And again, this is the illusion that the planet is moving backwards. Some may ask, okay, if this is just an illusion, if the planet isn't really moving backwards, but this is just how it looks like from the Earth, then why are we even talking about this? Well, we have another principle also in astrology, that we use a geocentric approach. So what's important for us is how things look like from our perspective here on the Earth. So even though technically, for example, if you're observing from the sun, you will not see those retrograde cycles. But here from the Earth, it looks like they happen. And this is important because this is our perspective. This is how we perceive things. So yes, the retrogradness is just how something looks like from the Earth, but it's very important and it really affects us. So now we are close to this point. Mars turning retrograde on the 30th of October, 2022, again, until January 12th, 2023. Mars will be retrograde in the sign of Gemini, starting from the 26th degree and going back to approximately the 9th degree of Gemini. We'll discuss more. What does it mean that Mars is retrograde in Gemini? But just so you know in advance, especially if you have planets or your ascendant or I don't know, other important points in Gemini, it's like really big deal for you. Now, let's talk about what does Mars represent, and based on that, we can understand which are the main areas, very generally speaking, that will be affected. So Mars is, first of all, a fire planet, a planet related to our willpower, the main planet related to taking action. So for this planet, it's really important to be expressed in the outside world. If the other planets, like, for example, Mercury, they can have also more influence on the inner level. For example, Mercury is about ideas, the thinking process. So for Mercury, retrograde is not necessarily that stressful, actually. But for Mars, the planet, which is supposed to be expressed outside, which is about your abilities to take action, to compete with others, to protect yourself, to fight with the world when that's necessary. When this planet is retrograde, it's quite uncomfortable for the planet, we may say. But again, we will discuss which are the strategies or what can help us handle better with this. But yes, it's true that Mars doesn't like this, because Mars likes to be out, achieving, pursuing, taking action, taking risks. And Mars is not about patience. It's not about generally slowing down or waiting or all of those stuff. Also, I like very much this expression or analogy that Mars is the servant of the sun. So the sun represents our individuality, our ego, our identity. And the role of Mars is to pursue the desires of our sun, so to speak, or to help us take the actions that will represent expressing our own individuality and identity. So when Mars is retrograde, this process will be changed. It won't go, in the regular way, so to speak. So again, Mars is about our willpower, about expressing in terms of, taking actions, in terms of competing, arguments, also fighting when it's necessary. We all know that Mars is also considered to be the planet of wars. And also from a more practical perspective nowadays, for example, Mars is related to cars, related to machinery stuff, especially heavy machinery stuff. It's related to everything that is made of metal. So in general, Mars also is related to business, because in business, you are competing with others. You need to prove yourself. You need ambition. You need to fight when necessary. So very, very generally speaking, business is ruled by Mars as well. Surgeries also, all kinds of invasive procedures, medical procedures, they are also ruled by Mars. So with all of those things, we need to be more careful during this time frame, October the 30th through January the 12th. Very, very generally speaking, it might be wise to avoid buying cars or making some planned, repairs or something. This applies also to houses and, all kinds of repair activities. They might be more problematic. So if possible, you might want to postpone them. Generally speaking, I would recommend to be mindful also with medical procedures, especially with the planned ones. Of course, when something is an emergency or it's a doctor recommended, this doesn't apply. But if you, for example, want to have some kind of, beauty procedure or something which is, not urgent or not recommended by a doctor, I would recommend you to wait until this period ends. So after the 12th of January, I would give it a couple of days after that. So let's say the second half of January should be fine. So what can we expect generally when Mars is retrograde, the planet which is supposed to help us express in the outside world, take action, compete when necessary? What happens when this planet moves backwards? We may notice that it is more difficult to be so direct, to take immediate action. We may notice that things are kind of like slowing down, that sometimes we face with certain obstacles, with some kind of challenges. That's all normal. But I want to invite you to think to take a look from another perspective. Not as this is something bad or negative, but like this is a very normal phase of the cycle. And I really like this expression also that success is not linear. and progress is also not linear. So in astrology, this is really obvious. The way also we have the lunar cycles, basically different planets we have so many cycles, and we see that there is always a dynamic, and we can never expect that things will remain on the same level. So there are fluctuations, there are ups and downs, there are different phases, and they are all needed. Just like we need, the end of the lunar cycle, the balsamic moon. In the same way, we also need the retrogradness of the planets. And this applies to the Mars retrograde phase as well. So this phase is really needed. We need this time to slow down, to maybe take a different look at things, a different perspective, to find new ways, to find new solutions. That's all needed. So from one side, my general recommendation is be prepared that things will be different. Be prepared that things will probably be slower in business, when it comes to communication or achieving some kind of plans, because Mars is retrograde in Gemini. This can all be expected. However, I don't think that we should put everything on hold and basically stop living. I don't think that's a good idea as well. I think that to go with the flow means to feel, to use your sensitivity and feel when is the time to pull back, when is the time to push forward, and also to try new things. So yes, we should still keep living and take action and do things, but we should be mindful. And one thing which I also find essential, generally Mars, when Mars is direct, is about action, initiating things. When Mars is retrograde on the other side, what might be more important is to learn or to focus more on how we react. So to be very open and mindful and alert about the external environment. Okay, so what happens in the outside world, other people, ideas that come from other people, social contacts, or all kinds of triggers from the outside world, and to focus on how you react to those different triggers, both positive and negative. Because if we talk about negative triggers, for example, someone is being aggressive or harsh or whatever, if you're more mindful about your reaction, you can flip the situation, you can change it, you may avoid some unpleasant consequences. But this also applies to the positive triggers or opportunities, to be very alert and mindful and to observe when there could be some new opportunities, and to focus on how you are going to react on those, what kind of steps you will take, what are you going to do. And of course, most likely the results of your reactions will be noticed later, after Mars turns direct, and maybe even after the end of the shadow phase, which is around the middle of March 23. But during this time, during those 2.5 months, you may plant the seeds. You may kind of like find a new strategy, a new approach. And again, I repeat, a huge focus should be how we react and work on that. Like, this is a huge step and can bring you incredible results, to learn how to react in a different way to different triggers or opportunities. Something also for me, very, very, very interesting. What Mars retrograde can bring us. And this is not very popular, so pay attention to this idea. It's about the possibility to find your inner resources during this time. So normally, again, Mars being direct, it's obvious, it's like noticeable, it's our willpower. The sun wants something, or we have a goal, idea, whatever. Mars is about taking the action in the outside world. This energy that, for example, Jung would call the libido or the vital force. So the energy that we need to take action, to materialize our ideas, to achieve our goals. But when Mars is retrograde, what we might be able to find are deeper resources. They are personal, and I'm talking about energy resources. So you can go deeper and kind of like access a deeper potential that you have. And now it could be the time to, tap into it and use it. Maybe not use it right away, but kind of like connect to it. And after the end of the cycle, it might be easier then to use it in the outside world as well. So this will be very personal, and it will really depend on where exactly Mars will be retrograde in your birth chart, in which house, and are there going to be any major aspects with your personal planets. Even if there aren't major aspects, you still need to look at the exact house which will be triggered by Mars retrograde, especially in this life area or those life areas. You might have this rare opportunity to find deeper psychological resources, which eventually will help you to take more actions or to be more productive later on when Mars turns direct. So that's a very, very interesting perspective, because when the planet is retrograde again in the outside world, things might be kind of a struggle. You may not be able to achieve everything you want right away. You may need to work harder. You may face some kind of, negative reactions or whatever. So in the outside world, things are more complicated. But the positive side of the retrograde planet is that on an inner level, it works better. It can be more productive. So again, this is probably the most important. Like, if you ask me, give me just one recommendation for Mars retrograde, I would bring your focus to this idea, to search for deeper personal psychological resources that eventually will help you to do things differently, or to do more, or to achieve more, and all of the other stuff that Mars represents. So again, make sure to check your birth chart for this information. Another thing also, generally, Mars is about our conscious will. So we want to take some action. We want to, move the glass of water. We want to go outside and run. We want to start a business, like conscious will. But when Mars is retrograde, we might be able to explore more subconscious intentions or patterns. And those are, again, very interesting, especially when it comes to, things which are in your blind zone, things that you don't recognize. And we all have those. Very often they could be related to some kind of destructive patterns or self-sabotage. it's a great time to explore this, to work on that. First of all, of course, to be honest, to recognize it. Yes, this is my subconscious intention, for example, to self-sabotage myself, or I don't know, to put myself in difficult situations in this area, for example. So seeing how things really are, and then trying to work on those. My recommendation, of course, is use GSR for those transformations, but you may also have other tools that work for you, which is also perfectly fine. But I want to recommend you to explore those possible self-sabotaging patterns and shift those. If we talk about psychology again, based on Freud's theory, we have two main impulses. One is the impulse to live, the other one is the impulse to die. And this is a very interesting perspective also, that every one of us has this vital or constructive energy, the energy of life, and at the same time, in certain way, in certain shape, form, whatever, we also have a destructive energy. We may call it self-sabotage or something else. So when Mars is retrograde, we can notice more those patterns and we can work with them. We can transform them. Of course, this will not happen if we are not intentionally focusing on that. But if we do this intentionally, we may have some great results. So explore your subconscious intentions or patterns. Things that may also show up during Mars retrograde are patterns related to self-aggression or passive aggression. Those are one of Mars retrograde favorite patterns: self-aggression and passive aggression. So you might want to work with this. You might want to, focus and transform this. Okay, I'm looking at my notes. Yes, also something very, very interesting. Mars retrograde could be related to some form of self-restriction. So explore this as well. Do you have this tendency to restrict yourself in some way? And of course, you should check again, where is Mars retrograde in your chart right now? But you can also check the position of Mars in your natal chart. This may also be relevant. And observe. Very often, we also have those models to restrict ourselves. And this can be triggered by Mars retrograde. And again, this can be a great time to work with this model. Another thing I want to mention also, again, going back to this idea that we need all of the phases of the cycles, that there aren't bad periods, they are just different. Which doesn't mean that they are not difficult. Of course, they can be difficult and sometimes they are, but they all have a point. There is always a meaning. And with Mars retrograde, what might be helpful is to explore this concept by Joseph Campbell. He is a very famous anthropologist, and he has done many very interesting findings. One of his books is focused on the hero's journey. If I'm not wrong, the book was called The Hero with the Thousand Faces or something like that. But I'm pretty sure you can find a shorter version online if you haven't read this one. So basically what Joseph Campbell explores is the path of the hero. The hero which goes on a mission or on a journey or pursuing a task, and the different stages through which the hero goes, like the initial enthusiasm and impulse, which is very close to Mars nature. Like Mars is about passion, about the desire, the impulse to do things, to, you know, to express yourself. So at the beginning, the hero's journey is definitely triggered by Mars. But then there are different stages. And at a certain point, the hero gets to a point where the old models no longer apply. They don't work. The old strategies don't work. Of course, this is the point of a crisis and some sort of culmination. And there needs to be a shift there. Sometimes there is like a magical creature that comes and helps the hero, or some other type of change, which provokes the hero to search for different strategies, to use different tools, different ways. Mars retrograde resonates very well with this stage of the hero's journey. A time when we may realize that the old models no longer work for us. They are no longer helpful. They don't bring us results. It might feel like some sort of crisis. But this is always part of the progress, actually. That's very important to understand that. Actually, we are moving forward when we get to this point. It's still a progress. And we need to search for some new strategies and new ways. So Mars retrograde will teach us how to do that. So my recommendation again, be very mindful, especially this time when Mars is retrograde in Gemini. Gemini is the sign of the mind, the rational, practical, logical mind, which focuses on the details, on planning, on preparing. And now this is very important, to think more, to analyze more before we take action. If something doesn't work, okay, slow down, think about it. Use your logical, rational mind. Because to be impatient, impulsive, to confront with the world or with people, this will not work. This will not work. What may work is proper analysis, self-analysis, and trying to find new tools, new approaches, new ideas. The results will be amazing. So the hero's journey, again, I highly recommend you to explore the story. It's, very inspirational. And especially when Mars is retrograde in Gemini, actually, we may benefit a lot from reading, learning, again, using information and using the mind. Now, let me tell you a few words also about Mars being retrograde specifically in Gemini. Of course, this means that people who have Gemini energy will be more affected, as well as the other mutable signs, which are Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces. Those will be the signs that will be mostly triggered by Mars retrograde. But also, very generally speaking, we need to be careful in communication when we are processing or working with all kinds of information, when we connect to people. There could be more arguments or sometimes verbal aggression. So we need to, again, be careful with those. what can be helpful and how to go with the flow. I would highly recommend you to take some time, if possible, daily, and journal. Generally, it's always recommended to take some time in the morning. There are whole, again, strategies and concepts. I forgot the name of the author. There was a lady, her book is called The Way of the Artist. Julia someone, I'm sorry, I forgot her name. And she even recommends to do this practice, morning pages practice, each day, each morning. Mars direct or Mars retrograde, doesn't matter. But right now, when Mars is retrograde, I think this can be a great idea to journal or to write down or to allow your thoughts to kind of like express themselves naturally without criticism, without editing. This can help you to really tap into some very interesting ideas, insights, and also to notice the progress or the direction, how things are unfolding for you. So this also helps, of course, for self-analysis. I highly recommend you to take some time for journaling, if possible, every day. Okay. Another interesting point I wanted to share with you. How things sometimes may work during Mars retrograde. Mars is again about expressing the impulse, but when Mars is retrograde, this impulse can be a little blocked, or at least it's not so easy to be expressed. And what may happen is that in the outside world, we may face with some kind of triggers, something that, it could be, for example, like a conflict or a challenge that comes from other people. And the purpose of that is to kind of like lighten up or provoke our energy or our impulse to express ourselves. I will give you a very real and kind of funny example, even though it wasn't so funny while I was experiencing it. But anyway, yesterday I was taking a walk with my father outside. And we are walking, just talking. And at a certain point, we face with a street dog. Like it's here every now and then we have those. Nobody's dog on the street. And the dog is like really aggressive. It gets really close to us and it starts barking. And it's like, it didn't attack us, but it was very close to doing this. And I'm telling you, like at this point, like my adrenaline got so high and I got so, active and triggered and, ready. Like, what should I do? Like, should we fight back if the dog attacks us or whatever? Like it makes you very, very present and alert. And after that, luckily, nothing happened. So we just passed by the dog and yeah, it didn't do anything bad to us. But it was an experience and it made me think how such triggers, when we feel provoked or attacked by the outside world, actually at those times, we can be very like put together and we can become more present, and it can actually have probably also a beneficial impact. Like, okay, like I need to be here and I need to do something. So, of course, I hope you will not need to face with mean dogs or aggressive animals, to realize this. But in some way, the outside world may provoke you. You may feel triggered, attacked by people, by events. And this is a lesson also and can be used in your advantage. You immediately become more present and you start thinking about your actions. What should you do? And again, here, The thinking part is very important with Mars retrograde in Gemini. You should think about your actions. Okay, now I would like one more thing also. Okay, actually, in a moment, I will share this with you. I want to tell you also which are the most important dates and the aspects that Mars retrograde will have with the other planets. So the first one is a square between Mars and Neptune and will be exact on the 19th of November. The aspect, of course, will be active a little bit before that, a little bit after that, but the culmination is on November 19th. Around this time, we should be especially careful with information and details and commitments, because Neptune squaring Mars may trigger lies, cheats, whatever, intentional, unintentional mistakes and all of that. So be extra careful with with details and information that is provided by other people, by media, whatever, all of that. Also, Mars squaring Neptune can trigger our motivation also. And we may notice that, for example, we are a little bit lazy, or we don't want to do something, or we are a little bit spacey. This is also possible. So pay close attention to your intuition. And the time can be very positive for creative work, creative actions. For artists, this can be also a very productive time. But again, the process or the focus is inside of us, the ideas, the inspiration. And if we are ready to put effort, this can be something positive. But again, the general background atmosphere might be kind of unclear, foggy. People may not follow their word. And yeah, all of those are possible. The next aspect, however, is very positive. It's on the 28th of November, but again, plus minus at least a week. It's a trine between Mars and Saturn, a very beneficial aspect which can bring some kind of structure, ability to organize things, to be more patient, to be hardworking, to also, that's very important, to focus on the long-term influence or the long-term results of your actions. So most likely it's about some kind of preparation or something which is more like a long-term project. But if you are patient, if you explore different ways, different strategies, if you try to connect again with your deeper resources, after the end of the Mars retrograde phase, you may achieve some important results, and the results will affect you for a long time. Next, we are continuing with the 1st of December. This is the day when Venus will have an opposition with Mars. So around this time, again, plus minus some days, we need to be very careful in our relationships. Mars and Venus are the two planets representing women and men, and it's very possible that there could be some tension. There could be competition, there could be arguments, there could be power struggles in relationships. So be careful. Also in negotiations. During this time, we need to be more careful. The next, actually, I skipped this one, sorry. So it's 2 days earlier, on the 29th of November, opposition between Mercury and Mars. This one is very important because Mercury is the ruler of Mars during this time. Okay, because Mars is retrograde in Gemini. Gemini is a sign ruled by Mercury. So this opposition is a double trigger. And we need to be especially careful with communication. There might be some arguments, conflicts, misunderstandings, non-constructive communication or arguments. But again, to search for new ideas, to try new ways, new approaches, that can be a very positive strategy. Next, we have the 8th of December, which is actually a really essential date. This is the date of the exact opposition between the Sun and Mars. And this is actually the middle of the cycle. So the cycle begins on the 30th of October. It ends on the 12th of January 23. And in the middle of a retrograde phase, Mars is always having an opposition with the Sun. Those are, just events defined by astronomy and, the principles in astronomy. When Mars is in opposition with the Sun, as well as any other planet, by the way, except for the Moon, when a planet is in opposition with the Sun, it's always retrograde. And this is the middle of the cycle. So between the 30th of October and the 8th of December, the first half of the retrograde cycle, this is a time when the energy is more kind of like, working on an inner level, not necessarily expressed in the outside world. We might say this can be the more difficult part as well, in general. The opposition between Mars and the Sun on the 8th of December is the peak. It's the culmination of the cycle. And then this energy may start to be somehow managed or reshaped or maybe even expressed in different ways. But the culmination, Sun-Mars opposition, is a time when we may face with some kind of conflicts. We might have some kind of struggles. But a very wise thing to do is to observe the outside world at this time and ask yourself, what is the world mirroring to me? Because oppositions are aspects which can bring projections. So there is something within me which I can't see or I don't want to see or it's suppressed or whatever. And because of that, I'm projecting it subconsciously on the outside world, usually on close people, but it could be all kinds of people, not only the close ones. And my projections are kind of like triggered by those people in the outside world, but the people are just mirroring to me something that I don't want to see in myself. This can be especially relevant during the time of the opposition between the Sun and Mars, because the Sun is the ego, our identity, our true self. And when we have an opposition with Mars, it might be difficult to see, to recognize those impulses. And we may need to kind of like confront with the outside world, someone or something in the outside world, so that we can get in touch with this part of ourselves. So, with other words, very simply, pay attention to the things that annoy you at this time and irritate you. People, events, especially people, of course. They can be your best teachers, especially in this case when the opposition is between Gemini and Sagittarius. It's about really a learning process. It's about ideas. It's about new perspectives, changing how we see things. And other people can really help you in this process, especially the ones that are annoying, irritating, triggering, and all of that. So again, this opposition is on the 8th of December, but we will feel this influence weeks before and after that as well. So projections. And the last aspect, on the 9th of January, we have a trine between Venus and Mars retrograde. So earlier, on the 1st of December, we have the opposition between Venus and Mars. And later, on the 9th of January, we have a trine. So something might be resolved. We may find a compromise. We may find a way to do things, in a softer way. Our desires can be especially important. What we want, what brings us joy. Also, other people, especially people we love. So this can kind of like polish things, this aspect, which is very close to the end. So Mars is turning direct on the 12th of January. On the 9th of January, this is already the time of stationary phase of Mars. We have this very nice softening aspect with Venus, which can polish the conflicts or maybe help us find some compromises, solutions, and all of that. And as we already said, on the 12th of January 23, Mars is turning direct. Be especially mindful about the dates of the shifts. So the beginning and the end, again, 30th of October, 12th of January, and a few days before and after that. Those are the stationary phases of Mars, and they are also the most intense. So at this point, you should be very careful. After that, after the middle of January, Mars will be direct, and Mars will cross the same degrees again from the 9th degree of Gemini through the 26th degree of Gemini. And this is what we call the shadow period. So it will continue until the middle of March. So for another 2 months, again, things will be different. They should be kind of easier and like going back to normal. But you may also notice that you can take action on the things that you have prepared for or planned for during Mars retrograde. Or if there were problems or conflicts, they might be resolved during this time. So again, middle of January through the middle of March can be the time of, things changing very quickly or seeing the results or putting things at the right places. So also very interesting time, but we have the green light to start new things. During the Mars retrograde phase, we need to be mindful with new activities, especially if it's a business or something really important. I can give, again, a personal example. Years ago, I got married on Mars retrograde. I wasn't well aware of astrology at that point. And 2 years later, on the next Mars retrograde phase, I got divorced. So, of course, Mars is never like the cause of things. Like it always resonates with what is supposed to happen. But yeah, such interesting things may happen, might be expected. Okay, now I think we can discuss some general ideas about each of the signs. So again, make sure to listen to your sun and rising sign. And if you want, again, a personal report, you can check the links below. We have a special discount for you now. So, Aries. And also one more thing, you can type questions. If you have any questions in the chat, I will address them at the end. For Aries, of course, this time is very important because Mars is the ruler of the sign. So for everyone who has sun or rising sign in Aries, this retrograde phase can be an important time to slow down, to, reconsider things, to find a new strategy and all of that. This applies also to Scorpio, the two signs which are ruled by Mars. also for Aries, Mars will be retrograde in 3rd house, which means be careful with communication during trips and travel, with cars, with technology, with all kinds of plans, with your neighbors, with your siblings, with education, and everything that we said can affect this area. I mean, both the positive and the challenging things. Things slowing down, having some struggles, but also your ability to find deeper resources, to find new strategies, to have a new perspective. For Taurus, the most important life area would be the area of resources. Of course, that includes money, but also other material belongings. Your energy can also be a great focus. And this may include also the physical side, the body, the health. So be mindful, reconsider things, focus on your material stability and resources and money. For Gemini, obviously, this will be essential because Mars will be retrograde in your sign, which means that personally you can be triggered, especially if your sun or rising sign is between the 9th and the 26th degree, plus minus also 1-2 degrees, I might say. Mars will cross your sun or rising sign. So time to find new strategies, new resources, to be very mindful about the actions that you take, how you express your willpower also. For Cancer, Mars is retrograde in a very, how to say that, invisible for the eye area, the area related to the past, to deeper psychological patterns and layers. So for Cancer, the influence of Mars can be on a very deep psychological level, to explore your psychological resources, to work with some subconscious aggressive patterns or self-sabotaging patterns or patterns that have triggered you in your past. So it's really about inner work, inner psychological work. For Leo, social activities, social communication, how you connect with groups or with your community, those will be some major focuses. Be mindful for possible confrontations or generally how you position yourself in the group that you are part of or your community. This can also apply to your ideals or dreams or things that you really want to materialize. For Virgo, very important time. Mars will trigger your social status, your career, business, reputation. So be very careful how you present yourself, your image, your status, how you communicate with authority figures, and again, of course, career and business. A really, really important time for Virgo. For Libra, Mars will trigger your plans for the future, your goals, also your dreams, education or plans for travel or maybe even for relocation. Very important themes for you. But overall, this can be a beneficial time, I would say even more than for the other signs. So for Libra and Aquarius, there might be some more positive opportunities than for the other signs because of the connection, the aspect with Mars at this point. So try to really explore your long-term goals, your dreams, your perspective about the future, and also the actions that you are taking in this direction. For Scorpio, we may say this period will be intense. First of all, Mars is the old ruler of Scorpio. Second of all, it will be retrograde in your 8th house, which is an intense house. It is a house that may trigger very deep transformations. Again, also very deep layers of your psyche can be triggered. They could be related to some kind of fears, some kind of unprocessed trauma, but also untapped potential or resources that you haven't recognized you have. So potentially a very, very transformative period for Scorpio, as well as also focus on resources, investments, energy, how you connect to other people, but not in a sense of communication, as much as really energy connections. For Sagittarius, also very important time. Mars will be retrograde in the area of relationships, connections with other people, also your image, popularity, if that's relevant to you, if you have an audience, if you work with clients one-on-one, this will be triggered and potentially transformed by Mars. Be careful with relationships, with partnerships. For you, especially, not a positive time for marriage, or even for new relationships. For Capricorn, Mars will trigger the area of work, daily routines, health, our daily tasks, how we organize things. So a great time to focus on the details, and also on a very practical level. Like, for example, to do something like tracking your time. How much time do you spend on this task, on the other activity? How much time you are wasting in whatever way, or to try some techniques. I believe this one was called Pomodoro technique or something like that. It's about focused time, like productive work, then taking a break. I think it was every 20 minutes or so. You can check again. It's a very popular technique. I think they're even selling such type of clocks that help you to track, or there are also apps on the phones that help you track those times. So to explore such tools, that will help you to track your time or organize your time or be more productive, but in a new way. At first, you may notice that the old ways don't work. They don't help. But something new may come up and it might be better. More attention to health certainly is needed. For Aquarius, I already mentioned, it might be kind of an easier and more beneficial time than for most of the signs. But you need to be careful with your romantic life, with dating, with love, with the things that you are passionate about. Also art or creative projects, or everything that you are passionate about, your hobbies, your children also. Things may require different strategy, different approach, and new realizations. And finally, for Pisces, Mars will trigger your personal life, your relationships with family, with your relatives, with the people you live with, or your home, the place where you are. So be more mindful, be careful with properties. Generally, I wouldn't recommend you to invest or to sell or to buy. Like, things might be tricky, not very easy, not very clear. So if possible, try to postpone things. But you might think about this, like, do you have a home? Do you want to have a home? Do you need a new home? Are you happy with the people you live with? Do you need to change something? Are people respectful of your own desires, or are you allowed to express your will naturally, or yeah, all of those things can be important. And one more thing I want to add generally about all of the signs, no matter where Mars will be, in what sign, in what house, Mars retrograde can be a positive time to restart something that you have done in the past, but for example, you stopped doing it, or it wasn't the time, or whatever. Restarting projects, or even business activities, or all kinds of activities, this can be something beneficial. And also fixing things, again, through analysis, through patience, through tapping on your deeper resources, you may find new ways how to be more productive, how to this expression also, do less but achieve more. Mars retrograde can help us to learn how to do that, especially when we have the intention. Okay, and again, I repeat that if you want to get your personalized Mars retrograde report, now there is a very special discount for a limited time. So check the links below, and I will describe what Mars will trigger specifically for you, with the aspects with your personal planets, with exact dates, with very specific recommendations. And also, if you prefer, you might get a 2023 prediction also. Special offer for that. Let me check the questions. For those watching the recording, you may also type questions. I will try to answer. Great that we have people from different places joining us. Ladybug shares, I have Mars in my 10th house. It's already been triggered, having to put my work life on hold to care for my son. Yes, Mars may shift our priorities and really focus our energy in a different direction. This is already happening with me, with the self-sabotaging and realizing patterns. Yes, it's possible that you may already notice something because Mars is already at the shadow zone. So the shadow zone of Mars began around the beginning of September. So almost 2 months earlier. And those could be, again, the first signs of what might be the focus, what might be the direction. So absolutely, especially people who are more open to observation or analysis, they may already notice the shifts. But again, I want to bring your attention especially to the times of the shifts around the 30th of October and the 12th of January. A couple of days before and after that, when Mars is stationary, the energy is especially activated. And the end of the shadow period is the middle of March. So you may also notice things unfolding and changing and transforming by this time. But in a new way, of course. After the middle of January through the middle of March, things might be kind of, faster and easier also. Plans to see my family, to resolve issues, or just observe. Well, that's a difficult question, and honestly it would really depend on how Mars is affecting your chart. it is possible that we may find solutions to old arguments, previous confrontations, but a general advice, don't initiate a conflict or a fight. The one who initiates a conflict will not win the conversation or the argument. So even if you feel like you have the right, you are really, you are right in this situation, don't be the one to bring this up and, to want the other person to admit, or I don't know, to do something like, not a very good strategy. Generally, Mars is about attacking, right? It's like, it can be very literally, like, for example, if you're fighting, or if we talk about wars, or like, physical confrontations, or all kinds of confrontations, Mars is about attacking. But when Mars is retrograde, it's much more important to focus on reacting. So to observe, to be in a more passive position, and to focus on how you will respond, not to initiate the fights or the confrontations, because that won't work very well. But yeah, if you feel provoked or attacked by other people or sabotaged by other people, you really need to focus on how you are going to respond on this, because you're not supposed to, just give up and wait and, be extremely passive. No, if the outside world is provoking you, you should focus on your response and reaction, but perhaps again, in a wise way, through analyzing and finding which is the best decision for you and for the other person, hopefully. We seem to be currently living in the age of misinformation. Any thoughts on how Mars retrograde can impact that trend? Yes, that is also a fact. Information can be misleading, intentionally, unintentionally. A special focus is the square between Mars and Neptune, so November 19th, and then the opposition between Mercury and Mars, November 29th. Those are like the most problematic periods in terms of information, misleading information. It's possible that something might be resolved, something might kind of like show up on the surface, that, that people may have less tolerance to lies, to, this fake, for example, politeness or hypocrisy, or sometimes, again, just direct lies. So in terms of some kind of social changes or focuses, frankly, when it comes to negotiations, it's unlikely that the period will be very productive. But it is possible that socially, people may kind of like feel, like, okay, it's enough, it's time for a change. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are some kind of scandals, information that can be revealed, which is important, and somehow revealing, secrets or lies, or that is totally possible. So yeah, from one side, it may seem like it's a problem, but from another side, it's possible that something may show up on the surface. I mean, like very globally, socially speaking. So yeah, we'll see. Like the times are really interesting, my friends. Like those 2.5 months are extremely interesting. I want to add something else, which is not directly related to Mars retrograde, but because it overlaps, it happens in the same time. Of course, we cannot pretend it's not there. What I'm talking about is the square between Saturn and Uranus. This is an aspect which we have experienced for more than a year, almost 2 years, on and off. And now for the next 2 months, this aspect is very close also. Uranus in Taurus in conjunction with the North Node, squaring Saturn, which is in Aquarius, in a very strong sign, but under the rulership of Uranus. Socially, globally, politically, this aspect is very important now. And it also represents, some kind of struggle between the old and the new. And both of the planets are very powerful. Uranus wanting the revolution, the innovation, the new things. The North Node is there as well. So the focus on the future, on, improvement, on growth. And on the other side, Saturn, which is in Aquarius, a very strong sign, and Saturn, which wants to keep the old forms, the well-known rules and principles. So those two polarities are extremely accentuated right now. And for the next 2 months, we will be witnessing also and experiencing this energy. And it's important when we have a square aspect like the one between Saturn and Uranus, the solution there is action. When Mars is retrograde, action doesn't come so easily. We may need to be patient, be mindful, or think twice before we act. But nevertheless, it's still an aspect which requires some struggle, some effort. And yeah, it is interesting, especially in November, when we have also an eclipse, which will trigger important points as well. The times are very interesting, and it could be a time also of a breakthrough. Obviously, if we give up on the couch, we can hardly expect the breakthrough. But if we are prepared, if we are focused, if we know that, okay, now things may not go in the same way, in a smooth way, but something new and important may come up, especially also because of this Uranus North Node conjunction. It's time for changes, but we should be mindful and respectful also of the past. So we shouldn't be too radical, too impatient, too drastic. We have this not simple task to find the balance between Saturn and Uranus. Two planets which even in mythology, they are enemies, they are completely opposite, but at the same time, so important, both of them. So we live in interesting times. Waking people up more aware, I hope. For some people, yes, absolutely. Some people might be able to see through things, to find a new perspective. Absolutely. Especially around the time of the opposition between Mars and the Sun. Mars in Gemini, the Sun in Sagittarius. The exact date is the 8th of December. But of course, plus minus some days or actually weeks. We may really be able to see things from a different perspective. Obviously, not everybody everywhere, but some people might be really become more aware, more conscious, may recognize things. So, yeah, interesting 2.5 months. So thank you very much for joining me today. Expect more news from me very soon, including free 2023 general horoscopes for the signs, including new courses also starting very soon. And yeah, who knows what other ideas during Mars retrograde in Gemini may show up. I'm excited. So again, I want to summarize for the last time, really, the positive things that we can do, how to go with the flow during Mars retrograde. Focus on your responses. Focus on how you react to the triggers, to the events, to other people in the outside world. Most importantly, try to dig deeper and find deeper resources within you that will help you eventually to take new actions, to try new things, to achieve more. So work on your resourcefulness and to find things that you didn't expect you have, energy, potential that you didn't expect you have. Everybody has this in different amounts, in different ways, with different potential, but everybody has a deeper potential than they realize. So dig deeper, find this, try new strategies, think twice before you take an action, and also explore the constructive and the destructive energy. Focus on the hero's journey, the idea that we need to find something new. Other people may show you something. You may learn important information. So also focus on explore your projections. What annoys you in the outside world? What irritates you? Those could be parts of your own shadow, and it's always very important. Okay. So thanks for everybody who joined me live. You can watch the recording later. It will be available on the channel. And if you want to share comments, thoughts, questions, you are welcome to do so. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And I will see you very soon.